Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news mashup video today, starting with a fight announcement, and it's the first of 3 in this video. This first one involves Jarrell Miller, and I actually did do a video yesterday. I was about to publish it, and then his opponent was confirmed. And here's the thumbnail to prove that it was going to be a standalone video, but because it had changed and I'm a little bit under the weather, I decided to fold it into today's video, a news mashup. So fighting Jerry Forrest, and this is going to be next month in July. So Jerry Forrest, for those who don't know, is a guy who's got a record of 26-3, but it is a record which is heavily padded. After a couple of losses about 6 or 7 years ago to Michael Hunter and Gerald Washington, Forrest dropped down to extremely low tier opposition and rattled off about 18 wins in a row, surfacing last year to face Jermaine Franklin, but losing. That was a split decision loss, and arguably, in my view, I thought that he won that fight. But, he didn't get the decision, but he is a guy who was somewhere between top 50 and top 100. So Jarrell Miller, on his return, and bear in mind, Miller hasn't fought since 2018. The last opponent that he fought was late in that year. It was Bogdan Dinu. I'll just double check when that was. That was in November 2018, so over 18 months out of the ring. And this opponent, it pretty much, is a resumption of the status quo for Miller, facing an overmatched opponent who is expected to lose. I guess a lot of people, or some people may say Miller is owed a tune-up given his inactivity, but then again, it was inactivity enforced by his own stupidity, failing a number of doping tests ahead of what would have been a fight with Anthony Joshua. So he's been out of the ring for 18 months now. It's over a year removed from that PED scandal. Miller versus Forrest. It's going to be in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand on the 9th of July. So I see Miller basically getting some rounds in here. I mean, he's probably going to stop Forrest at some point, but Forrest, kind of like Dinu, a good boxer who can move and make it a little bit difficult and awkward, but ultimately Miller's going to have too much for him. And it'll be interesting to see, I think, for everyone looking at Miller's career now, what's going to happen in terms of his output after, obviously, this whole PED scandal. There's questions about, was he on stuff before? We just don't know. And if I was Jerry Forrest, I would be hoping that there is some strict and rigorous testing in place for this fight. Bear in mind, it's less than a month out from that date. It's hard to sort of know what's in place in terms of have they been testing Miller over a period of months, because in this case with him, perception and the optics of the whole thing is important. He needs people to believe that he is a clean athlete because there's a cloud hanging over him, given he had, a whole bunch of stuff in his system, including 2 things that had to be injected, although he's put that down to a medical procedure. But some of that sounds a bit thin, but I'm not trying to relitigate the whole thing in this video. But Miller versus Jerry Forrest on the 9th of July. Yeah, it is kind of a resumption of play. Miller facing an overmatched opponent who'll go a few rounds but ultimately be stopped. I was hoping that Top Rank would maybe pitch Miller in with Carlos Takam. We were hearing that Takam versus Rivas was originally going to be held on that date, but then Rivas got injured. But perhaps the situation will be, if Carlos Takam does fight on that date still, they'll be on the same card and perhaps they'll get in the ring, square off, and that'll be a matchup we might see later in the year. I think that's a better fight for Jarrell Miller, and arguably might be the best name on his resume should he fight and beat Carlos Takam. But Jerry Forrest, yeah, he's okay, kind of like Dinu, padded record, really unheralded, and I think he's going to lose to Jarrell Miller. If it's not a stoppage, which I think it probably will be, it's probably going to be something like, if it's over 10 rounds, 7 rounds to 3 or 8 rounds to 2, something like that. But moving on, The German Christian Thun, who stands at almost 6'9", will be facing Jason Bergman in Florida in July. That's July 17th. Thun, he signed with Universum Box Promotions back in April. He's currently 4-0. And remember, this guy was sparring with Deontay Wilder back in 2018. he was the guy that Wilder broke his arm on. That was about 4 or 5 months out from the first Tyson Fury fight, but news of that injury didn't emerge till well after the first fight. But Thun, he a decent boxer, decent technician, but still very early stages of his career. Jason Bergman is a sort of high-level journeyman gatekeeper who really is a good test for any up-and-coming prospect. So it's going to be an interesting fight to sort of see where Christian Thun is at, because really he's faced no one of note so far, but Jason Bergman gives us a bit of a level. So he says save the date, July 17, 2020. Meanwhile, fellow German Agit Kabayel will also be in the ring next month. He's due to fight on an SAS card on July 18, and that will be in Magdeburg, Germany. So Kabayel has been out of the ring for over a year. He had been due to face Marius Whyte, that was back in March, but obviously the pandemic sort of put paid to that. Whyte has been calling out Kabayel to get that rescheduled. He wants that fight. So we'll have to see what happens if Whyte is going to be the opponent here. Bear in mind, he's just had a camp, so he will be somewhat, in fighting shape and perhaps could step in here. And that would be a much better fight for Kabayel than if he was to face a Neville nobody. At this point, Kabayel needs to get back going, and Whyte has had a little bit of shine on his career recently, having a somewhat decent fight with an out-of-shape Dillian Whyte. But I think Agit Kabayel beats Marius Whyte all day, every day, and about a zillion times on Sunday. So we'll see what happens on the opponent front, but perhaps it'll come down to money if this is going to be a closed-door show, and they might just do a quick tune-up. Kabayel is signed to a co-promotional deal with Top Rank, but he has yet to have that first fight. He was actually meant to fight Victor Bisbal at the start of this year in America, but ultimately he had some visa issues. So I'm sure he wants to get over to the United States as soon as he can to sort of start that next stage of his career. Get in there with some of the better heavyweights, potentially within the Top Rank stable, but just in general in the division. And while we're talking about fight news, this isn't announced, but Dillian Whyte has signaled that his fight with Alexander Povetkin, the date is coming soon, saying fight date coming soon, working hard, #maximum violence. And we also have Christopher Lovejoy, who is entertaining the prospect of a Guido Vianello fight or with Trevor Bryan, but he is saying in the meantime, July 11th behind closed doors, Baja California, 20-0. See y'all soon. So Christopher Lovejoy, who is a serial call-out artist, seemingly going to be fighting in another club show of some description on July the 11th. We'll have to see. Lovejoy's had about 4 or 5 fights scheduled in the past 6 months or so that just haven't gone ahead. So we'll see where all that goes. And just rounding up this heavyweight news mashup video, Otto Wallin, who injured his foot earlier this year, he had to pull out of a scheduled fight with Lucas Brown, and he was rehabbing this left foot. It was a stress fracture of some sort. He is now back up on his feet. He is seemingly on the road to recovery. See here on screen, working out with his trainer Joey Gamache. So Otto Wallin on the road to recovery. So hopefully he will be in a fight soon. His last fight was almost a year ago now against Tyson Fury, and he really hasn't sort of capitalized on the sort of performance he put up in that fight. Hopefully we will see him back in the ring soon. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.